Welcome to Culture Couch Live. I'm Paul Roos. How are we all? G'day, Macca. G'day, Carly.
Hey,
and
Rosie.
g'day, Mel. How are we all?
Hi, Rosie.
Hi, everyone.
Good to see everybody. Things are going well. All good?
Going
Yep,
well.
it's going well. We've all taken our puffer jackets off to get started because it's absolutely freezing.
Or Mel with the puffer jacket on before. Looked very snazzy too, Mel. Good for going to the snow, but not sitting in the lounge room.
No, that's right. That's right. I might even turn the heater on in a minute.
There's an idea for you. All righty. Like I do normally, I'll sort of paraphrase this question. This was more of a comment that came through the website sort of thing. So this is from Peter, but I'll just phrase it. So what he's effectively saying, there's a lot going on in his workplace at the moment. They've got a couple of new executives. There's a lot of conversation around the hybrid workplace, people complaining about having to go into work, not having to go into work. They're finding that Mondays, no one's in the office. Fridays, no one's in the office. Mondays and Fridays, no one's in the office. Interest rates, there's a lot of talk around interest rates. I won't talk about what company it is. But so I guess my comment would be in the question, the way I would answer it is, how do we work, function, and put a system in place of what we can control? Because I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is we've probably been as out of control as ever. It was certainly in my lifetime. I can't remember a time where we've lost control. Now, obviously the pandemic, and no one knew what happened there. It's the big sort of hit. But I think out of that, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of concern. And now on top of that, as Peter was saying, he's got a couple of new executives. There's this massive discussion, which we're having with all our clients around the hybrid workplace. There's the interest rates that I think have just gone up yesterday. So again, maybe if I ask that question, what's your recommendation, Carly, to Peter? What if he was sitting there, talking to his CEO, because he's feeling it. He's clearly feeling it as an employee, and it sounds like he's a bit sick of all the noise and a bit sick of, well, why are we talking about it? We can't actually control a lot of these things. What's your advice to Peter if he was sitting down and chatting to his CEO about that?
Well, I think, like you say, Rosie, you have to control what you can control. So the thing that we talk about most is you can control your behavior. So, we would hope that these businesses all have values in place, and not values just to have them, but values that you actually use and actually reference and actually make decisions from. So we know that people want to be aligned with companies' values and individual values. So if that's the case, controlling what you can control means your behavior will align to those values, and just really focusing on that. So instead of getting sucked into whatever's happening, controlling that, but also then using the systems that are in place, because we know that we fall to the level of our systems, which is what James Clear tells us. So if we have the right systems in place and we stick to those systems, then we'll still be successful, I guess, regardless of what's happening in the environment, and just really focusing on what we can control is really important.
I think that's the key, isn't it, Macca? Like, it's what can you control, really? I mean, no one can control the interest rate rise. No one can control the pandemic. We can't control, unless you're the one hiring and firing, you can't control who's coming in and who's going out, et cetera, et cetera. But to Carly's point, there are some systems you can put in place that you can control. I'm going to agree with Carly, and I ask you to comment on that. But I'm also going to say, why do people not do it? Like, it fascinates me when people just go away from their systems if they've got really good systems, or don't put them in place in the first place.
Yeah, look, for a lot of our clients, obviously they've got a culture code. There's an anchor point. There's a reference point that enables them to, go back to that base. What is the purpose of this team? What are our values and what behaviors are we looking for? They're the controllables. You own those things. They're the things you can manage to. But when these external shocks and variable things come in from the economy, it's about just understanding, well, can I have any influence over those within my business, within my role? But how can I communicate? And the communication piece, I think, is another controllable. How can we
Yeah.
communicate up the chain, down the chain, and make sure everyone can be on the same page, reminding ourselves of, behaving to our role, delivering upon our role, but making sure communication stays alive so that we can keep sifting through these external things and understanding whether some of them do have an element of control from time to time. So yeah, it's about just, not putting the blinkers on, but putting it in a context of the code and the systemization you've got within your own business.
Yeah, I think, Mel, communication is probably the most underrated thing. And it's interesting, isn't it? I reckon when people get under pressure, they communicate less. And I think that's the biggest mistake, because everyone can see what's going on. So it's not like most people don't know the interest rates have gone up. Clearly, everyone knows there's been a pandemic. Everyone would know in Peter's case that there's been a couple of executives that have left, a couple have come in. It's fascinating, isn't it? Under pressure, and we talk about it all the time. Do you do what's best for yourself, or do you do what's best for your team? And I reckon there's a lot of that. I think, to Peter's point, I think there's a lot of protecting your own turf. Oh, things aren't, what if I don't have a job? What if things go bad for me? What if it looks bad on the P&L or whatever? Do you see that as a real problem?
Can I interrupt, Mel, just quickly, because you sent through a really good article in the newsletter about managers communicating the problems of the business. And I think, to Ruzi's point, that would be a really good, that's an amazing example that you've got right there.
Well, that's right. It's a very recognized thing, and even statistically, it makes a difference to the teams and the performance of the teams when the leader of the team communicates with complete honesty. So those who brush the issues under the rug lose a very important perceived characteristic in them, which is integrity. And so when a leader loses that, then you will immediately have a problem with your team. So to Carly's point, once you're communicating the issues with the team is coming on the journey with you. And that's what creates team and belonging and honesty and truth. The other thing it does is create authenticity. So sometimes you hear, somebody within a business might say, look, Matt, they're just words on a wall. They don't mean anything to me, or I don't agree with them, or whatever that is. That's often because the leader isn't living them and the team isn't living them every day. So there's two parts. The communication, to your point, Ruzi, is imperative, but the truthful communication is actually at the cornerstone of that. So communicating with authenticity and truth with your team. Here are our issues, and then showing the path through it is two really important parts to that. But brushing issues under the rug, not the answer. Never the answer.
I reckon you're right, Carly, because there's nothing worse than hearing something from someone secondhand. And I think that, to your point, Mel, it's not everything's going to go smoothly. And we know things aren't going to go smoothly. It happened in the last 2 years and potentially, but everyone can see it. Everyone can know it. I reckon there's communication, which I love, but it's honest communication.
Yeah.
And I think there's too much communication just for the sake of it. I better send out an email at the end of the week. Oh, things are fantastic. Yeah, well done. I'd like to welcome Carly. Yeah, this is, and everyone's sitting there going, geez, didn't I just read in the paper our ratings are down by, 10% or, so it's that honest communication. And then I think it's also finding what can we control in that, which getting back to what are the solutions? So here's the communication. I'm honestly telling you. And then there's nothing wrong with, I think good leaders ask good questions. Carly, what do you think about our ratings? How can we, so there's always that follow-up that I think doesn't happen. And that's part of the system, because I'll be surprised, with most companies wouldn't have, honest communication as one of their values. But again, to your question to you, Carly, why are we scared to sort of confront issues and hope they are swept under the carpet?
Well, it's a fear thing, isn't it? It's a fear about, what will they think? What will they do? What will it make me look like? So it's kind of that, psychological safety, vulnerability piece. But to your point on communication, if you don't do it, people make it up in their heads. So definitely. Even if you're in the office and they see conversations happening or people walking around, if you don't talk about it, they're going to make it up, or people will talk about it inadvertently and they'll get the message anyway. So in the world that we live in with, 10 different modes of communication sitting at our desk every day. If you don't do it, then people are going to know about it and you can't control the message. So I think that leaders have to understand that they need to control the message, and they need to do it in a really timely manner to make sure that they can do that. And even in a virtual workplace, if you're sitting at your desk and you're not hearing from anyone, then you're going to think something's up, right? So the communication piece is just so important in terms of what that looks like.
Can I pick up on that what you've just mentioned too, Carly, in terms of the timely manner? It's not just come in and tell the truth when there's an issue. I mean, this is a consistent piece for a leader, right? So when we're talking about the communication, it's an ongoing thing. So coming in when there's a crisis, even if it is truthful, is not nearly as effective as keeping people abreast of what's happening with the organisation and the reality of it on an ongoing basis. So I think, to your point, Carly, the timing and the consistency is key for this piece as well.
But then back to the systems, Rosie, you can put a system in place for that, right? So if it's really important, we have an all-staff meeting once a week and the leader tells us what's actually happening in the business. Like, to get into that rhythm, into that system, gets those things covered off pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think, Mac, to your point before, I think that's what gets back to your culture code.
Yeah,
like the culture code says communicate, and you're not communicating. Well, it just becomes a piece of paper on the wall, doesn't it?
Yeah, no,
so
it does.
You have to find a system to systemize your culture code.
Yeah, we've got to behave in our code and in ways that create psychological safety up and down and all the way through the organization. So, because there will be moments where a voice from lower down the chain of command is going to have an absolute gem. They need to feel safe to bring that up. Actually, there is a way that this external piece, impacts or can be dealt with in our business. And we don't want to exclude that opportunity. So it doesn't all have to come from the leader. And then active listening and being prepared to take the communication on board and work out what's really valuable. But if you haven't got the psychological sense of psychological safety, you're less likely to communicate transparently, bottom up and top down. It creates these doubts and these fears.
Yeah, maybe just a final comment for Peter from each of you. What if you're in Peter's position? What are some of the things that, I presume he's on the exec team, but I don't know for a fact. But let's presume he's on the exec team. What can Peter, then the next month, what should Peter really control, and what should Peter really work on? I'll start with Carly. I'll go with you first.
I would say give the leader feedback, because it's not easy to do. Leaders don't get a lot of feedback, but it's really important to do it in the right way, but to let them know what you need from them. So I would say really try and focus on giving a clear message up the chain to let the leader know what you need.
Yeah, excellent. Mel?
Yeah, I think that's critical, Carly. And aside from that, just recognise, Peter, what your role within the team, because everybody's a leader. You also have the remit, no matter what your position is. We don't know where you are within the organisation, but you too have the responsibility for truth and honesty. And there are people watching your behaviour as well. So be a role model leader, Pete.
Yeah, 100%. I think too many people stop doing their jobs under those circumstances. I'm getting a paycheck. Okay, things aren't going great, but I'm happy. Step up, keep doing your role to the best of your ability, and I think that's the minimum. I would say that's the minimum you should be doing. We see a lot where people just go, "No, it's too hard." So I think that's great advice. Macca, I'll finish with you.
Yeah, look, I suppose I'll take a slightly different tack here, because the things that have been said are absolutely spot on. But avoid. Sometimes people want to talk about things. They want to talk in their teams about what's going on externally, because it's kind of newsy. Talk to your teams. Talk directly, transparently to your teams about the things that are important for your team to keep doing up and down the chain, and avoid that trap of getting caught up in the headlines. It doesn't help anyone. Creates more doubt and creates more fear within the team. So talk to the issue. Talk to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Matt, because some of the stuff will be relevant. So some of the stuff that's happening will be relevant to your business. But if it's not, don't worry about it. Don't bring it up just because it's a headline in the newspaper and we think we have to talk about it. If it's absolutely relevant to the business, interest rates going up, look, we might have to put our product up by 2%, then talk about it. But if it's not relevant to the business, then just let it go. So hopefully, Peter, that's good conversation, but 3 great tips to finish it off. So thanks for that question, Peter. Really appreciate it.
Really
And
good one.
thanks to James. Thanks, Carly. And thanks, Mel.